We are here to give you some great information about mastering your round one application, submitting in round one, understanding the application process. And I'm joined by an amazing panel of friends from some of our fabulous member schools. So thanks for being here. My name is Ashley Lotzenheiser. I'm the director of pre-MBA programs at Forte, which means I get to oversee all of the programming we do for candidates like yourself that are considering an MBA, that are in this process on your journey to your next professional step in business school. So thanks for being here. Prior to working at Forte, I did work in admissions and recruiting for about 10 years. So I get to wear that hat a little bit today as I moderate this conversation. But thank you all for being here. And if you're new to the work that we do here at Forte, we are a nonprofit organization all about fueling the future of business. We've been around for over 20 years. We are an amazing, powerful alliance of great corporate partners, undergraduate and graduate business school partners, amazing women donors. And over that 20 years, our organization, our kind of network has grown to be over 125,000. So thanks to you for being a part of that network. What we do here at Forte is help you reimagine what's possible in your career. So obviously an MBA can be a huge pivotal step in changing the trajectory of your career. We're also hoping to make the MBA more accessible to candidates like yourself, whether it's through programming like this webinar here today or things like our Forte Fellowship program. We want to make the MBA a reality for more candidates. I mentioned we are a nonprofit organization, and the work that we do, we like to think is not just for your journey to an MBA program, but is through and beyond as well. So you might continue your journey by attending a member school, being a Forte Fellow, and hopefully being a part of our alumni network as well. We do work with over 60 MBA member schools in the US, Canada, UK, and Europe. So depending on where you're thinking about your MBA, you're going to find Forte member schools all over the globe. These are our full-time partner members. This is not an eye test. My wonderful colleague Melissa is posting a link to this in the chat, so you can go check them out. We also work with about 30 executive and professional programs. So if you're thinking about working while doing your MBA, we have lots of options there as well. We certainly hope that your journey with us does not stop today, but we'd like to see you in the near future. We have some events coming up, which are Forte Forums. These are our flagship opportunities to connect you with our partner and member schools. So these events are going to take place across North America in August, as well as virtually throughout the fall. It's a wonderful way to connect with partner MBA schools, with future peers, and hear from admissions as well as alumni. So people that work every day in the admissions process, and also alumni that have been in your shoes before. So we'd love to see you in person if you're available for any of these events. We'd love to see you face to face. Otherwise, we'd love to see you virtually at one of our events in the fall. Depending on what type of MBA program you're interested in, there's lots of options there as well. So hopefully we'll see you again soon in just a couple weeks. The other program I want to note is we do have an application prep program. So if you're thinking you'd like some more assistance as you go through the application process, we would love to help you do that. So we have a couple of different flavors of MBA launch, all of which are designed to help you build your best application to business school. So all the components of the application process, everything you need to know about selecting the right schools. We offer that in 3 different flavors. The program that's open now is our on-demand program. So it's a self-paced, asynchronous program you can complete in as little as 3 weeks. So you could be ready to submit a round 1 application if you do the on-demand program. Candidates who complete that program also get access to our wonderful community. And then candidates who complete that program do get fee waivers to over 40 of our partner schools. So my colleague Melissa will drop a link in the chat. Otherwise, you can scan that QR code as well. Finally, I want to give a thank you to our schools that are sponsoring today's event for making today's programming possible. So a big thank you to them for being here today. But with that, I think no one probably signed up for this webinar to listen to me talk. They probably signed up to this webinar to listen to my amazing friends in admissions talk. So here's how we're going to spend our time together. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, tell us where they work, programs that they offer, kind of what their role is. And then I have some questions for our panel as we go through. So I have some prearranged questions to kind of get the ball rolling on our conversation. I think lots of things that are probably on your mind today are on my list to ask. So I'm going to ask questions, and then we have time saved for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions as we go through, make sure you drop those in the Q&A. You do not have to wait till the end. Feel free to drop those now, whether it's about Forté or about some of the content from today's panel. You're welcome to drop those in the Q&A as we go, and then we'll wrap up at the top of the hour. So with that, let's do some introductions. I'm going to call on each of our panelists. Megan, you're in my top corner, so I'm going to make you go first.
Amazing. What an honor. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I'm from Georgia Tech's Scheller College of Business. We're located in Midtown Atlanta, so right in the heart of the city. We have a full-time MBA, an evening or part-time MBA, and then an MS major in management, which is basically just a major in management for early career professionals. And I loved Scheller so much that I decided to do our evening MBA. So happy to answer questions from an admissions perspective, but I'm very passionate about, the program and the community here at Scheller.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Jen, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Howder. I am the Director of Admissions at the Johns Hopkins University Carey School of Business. Very excited to be here. Love the Forté organization and very happy to be sharing some updated information. You may have seen a couple of weeks ago, our big news is that our full-time MBA is expanding to our Washington, D.C. location. While Johns Hopkins is primarily located in Baltimore, Maryland, we've had some programs down in D.C. for the past few years. We opened a brand new facility back in August of 2023. So we are officially moving our full-time program there for the fall of 2026. And with that, adding a few additional programs. So along with our full-time MBA, we also will still offer our flexible online MBA, but we will have an executive MBA program in a hybrid format that will be out of DC. We will have an accelerated MBA for our Johns Hopkins graduate students. And then we also are adding a Master's of Management, or MIM, for those who might be a little bit earlier in their career. So we're really excited about all of the changes and just very happy to be here today to talk to you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Congrats on the, not move, but expansion. Yes.
Expansion.
Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here today. So I'm Elizabeth Langer. I'm from the admissions and recruitment team for the MBA here at the Cambridge Judge Business School, based in Cambridge in the UK. So I specifically represent the MBA, but we also have our executive MBA, global executive MBA, a number of different master's programs. We have our MPhil in management, which is for people who are, again, earlier in their career, I think, like Jen was saying. And then we have our PhD programs as well. So very excited to talk to you all today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And Paul.
Hello, my name is Paul Manny. I am the Assistant Director for Global Admissions at Stanford Graduate School of Business in Palo Alto, California. And we have just a handful of programs. So our full-time MBA, our one-year Masters of Science in Management. Welcome to the club, Jen, it sounds like. And then we have a PhD program as well. All of those programs will be in residence. We unfortunately do not have any part-time programs, just to highlight. Yeah, excited to be here. And Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate the introductions and a great way for candidates to understand the range of programs that exist. Everyone loves calling it a little bit something different. But we are here to talk about round one applications, which I think for most of our audience is probably related to the full-time MBA program. So I'm going to kind of go with the conversation preface. Then most of what we're going to talk about today likely relates to residential or full-time MBA programs. So what I want to start with is, what are some of the advantages of applying round one? And are there any common misconceptions, any kind of misinformation out there about applying in round one? Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you kick us off.
Absolutely, I would love to. So in terms of the benefits of applying in round one or even in earlier rounds, I think that there's some really universal benefits. So for example, funding is often one that we talk about, and I'm sure that other schools can speak to that too. Both internal funding as well as external funding. Some external foundations or companies might ask that you kind of have a conditional or unconditional offer in hand to make you more competitive, as well as internal funding. So for example, we at Judge Business School, we have a number of different opportunities that are available earlier in the admissions rounds, or some that are available rolling until they're awarded. So applying earlier, particularly if you have a strong application, can give you a better chance of accessing that funding. Additionally, if you are an international student, this is something that I think is really important. You might have more of an opportunity to have more time to work through your visa, to potentially make a really big geographic move. So we have about 90% of our cohort are internationals. So we really do kind of focus on this and saying, if you do need to make that move, if you need to make sure that you have time to get your visa, apply earlier and it'll give you that kind of space. Even if you're not making a big move, maybe you just want to work through things a little bit fast, not as quickly. You want to make sure that you have time to do things more fully. You can apply earlier and it'll give you that headspace. And I think also individual schools will have their own benefits. So do your research into your schools. When do you think you might want to apply? For us in particular, one that we will really speak to often is our college system. So in addition to being a member of our business school, you're also a member of one of our 31 historic colleges. But some of these do have caps on the number of students they can accept. So if you have a really burning desire to be a part of one of these colleges, maybe apply a little bit earlier so that you can boost your chances. So do look into different schools to make sure that you're not missing out on something that's going to be really important to you down the line.
I love that, like a little something extra there at Cambridge to think about. Anybody else, either some advantages that you see in round one or kind of common misconceptions that you hear about?
I would just
Yeah.
say really
Oh,
quick.
Paul and then Jen. Great.
For Stanford, speaking specifically about funding, our financial aid is need-based. So regardless of when you apply, that will, typically look the exact same. But I will say for us, to Elizabeth's point on really finding out the specifics of each school, one of the opportunities that you open yourself up to if you apply in round one is the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program, which you will have to apply in October, and you have to be admitted to a program to be eligible for. And I'll drop the link in the chat for you to learn a little bit more, to be mindful of everybody else's time.
And I was just going to add also in terms of scholarship, I think a lot of people fear that you're going to have the best chances of receiving the largest award in one of those earlier rounds. I know all schools are different, so definitely talk to all, of your potential schools, but we always make sure that we have money for students regardless of which round they are applying in. It's not that our bank has run dry if you wait to apply in a later round. So there will be funding. And I think the biggest thing is really, I just like to talk to candidates about the idea of peace of mind. So if you are someone who you need to have, that notion of where you're going, especially I generally equate it to the holiday season. You'll have that decision by, the end of the calendar year as you go into that holiday season. And that just gives you a nice peace of mind to already know where you're headed for the next year.
Awesome. Thank you all for that insight. Appreciate it. Let's talk a little more specific because we kind of said like in general terms, you'll have more time. You have more time with your decision. I'd love to kind of dive in to what is the timeline for candidates who are applying in the first round. So I'm gonna, Jen, pick on you. Give me an idea of what your timeline is. When do candidates hear back? What is that timeline for round one application?
Sure. So we're a little bit unique in that we actually have an early action round. It is non-binding in any way, and the timeline really aligns with most other schools round one. We just do an early action so that we can pack both an early action round and a round one in before that holiday season. But the timeline there is once you submit your application, you'll generally hear from us within about 2 to 3 weeks if you've been invited to interview, which I think is fairly common with most programs in terms of the interview process being by invitation only, whatever interview format that might be. So you'll receive an invitation to interview, you'll complete that interview process. And then there is always a date posted for when we release our decisions. So it's not on a rolling basis. We don't release decisions early, but there is a deadline of when we get those decisions out. So for instance, if you're applying in our early action round on September 10th, you will receive your decision by October 22nd. So every student receives a decision that day. It also includes any scholarships that we're able to offer. And then you'll have a deposit deadline. And for us, that deposit deadline is going to be December 3rd. One of the most important things I really recommend for students as you're looking at different schools is trying to align the different deadlines with the different schools that you're applying, because you don't want to be put into a position where you've been accepted to one school and you're being asked to deposit, and yet you don't have a decision from another school. We work our hardest. I know crafting these deadlines is always like a little puzzle for me because I want to make sure that we're setting our students up to have those decisions from other schools by the time they need to tell us. But it also is up to the applicants to make sure that you're looking at those timelines. We really generally don't grant extensions for that reason. So make sure you're looking at everyone else's deadlines in terms of not just the application deadline, but when you're going to need to give them a decision.
Definitely a time to be organized is when you're looking at school application deadlines. Lots of candidates do the first step, which is let me look at when the deadline is. But not everybody does the important step of when are you going to get a decision back, and then when do you need to submit a deposit, because schools are assuming that you're going to do at least that amount of homework when it comes time to then be making a decision. Anybody else have a vastly different round one timeline, or just want to kind of double tap on what Jen said? Yeah, Megan.
We're pretty similar. We don't have an early action, but our round one deadline is pretty early. So for us, it's October 1st. And then interviews by invitation only, but we have a set date. So just, yes, double tapping or reinforcing what Jen said of making sure that you've got a spreadsheet or you've got whatever system works for you to figure out the deadlines. So for us, we will release decisions November 21st for that round one deadline. And I also wanted to add, when Jen was talking about that peace of mind and kind of having your decisions from round one around the holiday season, with that November 21st decision release, I think that gives our applicants and our admits a lot of time to visit campus when they have some time off work, and that's typically when we see an uptick. So I just think that's another benefit of round one, is having that time to travel. If you're wanting to visit the schools that you are admitted to, could be really great with round one.
Elizabeth, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our round one is a little bit earlier. So our deadline is in the end of August, actually. So then we do have our round one and our round two before December. But just to what Jen was saying about not offering extensions, we actually do offer extensions because we realize that we're a bit earlier. Maybe people are waiting on other outcomes, and we want to make sure that they have the best and most informed decision. But that being said, if you do happen to apply earlier, you might have a little bit more flexibility if you do need that time. Whereas if you're in crunch time in rounds 4 or even 5, there might be less flexibility on the school's end in order to give you a little bit of time to make those decisions and maybe hear back from other schools about offers or funding.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. So I asked these questions, which I think were pretty leading questions about round one, if I do say so myself. I was like, oh, round one is great. Like, how much time you get? You can visit at the holidays. Like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. But there are definitely going to be scenarios where round one isn't the right option for candidates. So Paul, are there any scenarios where you think candidates should wait rather than applying in round one?
Definitely. So I'd say more generally speaking, applying in round one can be a great signal of preparation and maybe even enthusiasm. Obviously, all of the reasons that my colleagues have mentioned are also great reasons to apply in round one. But submitting early only helps you if your application is ready. So if you are rushing to meet a deadline, or you know you'll be in a much stronger position in just maybe a few weeks, or maybe even a month later, it is definitely worth pausing and considering a round two. I think there's a few reasons, right? So retaking the test is one. So if your GMAT or GRE is below where you want it to be, and you know you can do better, like that may be an opportunity to spend a little bit more time, get what we, like to say, test confident, and be prepared with that test, right? So that is one space. If you're also expecting a promotion, like it may be worth waiting the weeks or maybe a month that it will take to get that promotion to really be able to talk about what that is. And then I think the last one for me, anyways, is really about personal clarity, right? If you are deciding now that maybe an MBA is right for you and you haven't really fully fleshed out like why the MBA, why now, what it is I plan to get out of the program that I'm looking at, how they can help me get there, right? Like those are questions that you'll need to answer in the application process, whether it be in the application or during the interview. And if you don't have those answers for yourself ready and super clear, it may be worth a little bit of time to really flush out that clarity. I'm sure there's several other reasons that have come up over the years as folks have asked about this, but I'll let some of my colleagues maybe chime in on a few other examples.
Thanks, Paul. Great examples. Anybody else have some thoughts on reasons why you kind of might want to wait? I do think a kind of a theme to that, that you kind of mentioned, Paul, is like a lot of those are application strengthening aspects, right? So like maybe you're going to have a higher test, maybe you'll have more job performance, maybe you'll have more clarity. Like there are things that are making your application stronger. It's not just, well, I just want some more time. I'm a big proponent of the something that can be done at any time is done at no time. So like you eventually have to hit submit on the application. So don't just let yourself extend for forever. But Paul brought up some great examples of reasons to wait for sure. And I do think that personal time to reflect is probably one of the hardest ones to pin down because probably never done doing that, not to get too philosophical, but you're never done reflecting on your life. But especially when it comes to the application process, because what some of the other panelists mentioned, right, is the interview. So if you don't have really solid reasons for wanting to do an MBA and being able to articulate those well, it's not just going to be an issue for your application, but it might be an issue when you get to that interview stage as well.
And Ashley, if you don't mind,
Absolutely.
I do want to call out, I didn't say this, but round two is not a consolation round, right? All of our programs are going to admit a lot of folks in round two. And that, again, for all of us. So it is definitely much more important that your application is strong and that we are seeing the best version of not just you, but your application, over it being early, right? When you think about financial aid considerations, that's obviously something that you want to consider. But it is definitely like you're not going to have the opportunity to submit in round two if you've submitted in round one, right? So make sure that first submit is your best submit.
Yeah, I think that's a key piece, and we'll just say it explicitly, is you only get to submit once in the application cycle. So, make sure you're shooting your shot the best you can, if you're going to submit in round one. Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Paul and Ashley said. I do just want to call out that I've seen and I've found that since we're on a Forté call and it's primarily women, our women are typically our applicants who are most hesitant and have the most, they're just hesitant to submit. They think it could always be better. They're over preparing. They're really overachieving in this application process and a lot of times. And while that makes for a really strong application, I would also caution some of you to do some actual self-awareness and self-reflection and say, no, this is good enough. This is really strong. This is my best. And I'm not going to wait for another 2 months, like Ashley was saying, just to make sure that every tiny little detail is exactly perfect, because a lot of times you're already doing the good work. So I just want to give you that encouragement. Now, of course, there are some pitfalls, and we'll talk about mistakes when you're rushing and things like that. But I do find that our women sometimes need a little more encouragement of, no, you've done the research, you have a good test score, you're looking at the school profile, you've attended the webinars, like you're ready. So if you feel ready and you know that you've done your best, then round one is still a great time to apply.
Well, you teed up my next question very well, Megan. So I'm gonna just stick with you if you don't mind. You mentioned this. What are some common mistakes you see candidates make when they rush through the process?
I think it does go back to that piece of not having a clear enough story and not doing enough research. So that is the biggest thing for me, is not having an answer to those common questions of why an MBA, and not just why an MBA, but why an MBA at this specific school, right? We all mentioned our schools and the different programs that we have. You can already tell that they're different in a lot of senses, right? So what is it about that school that calls to you? Because we're going to want to know that you're going to contribute to the community, to the classroom, and have, great career outcomes for our specific student population, right? So that's probably the biggest piece. In round one, I do see a lot of people apply who haven't done very basic groundwork, like attending a webinar, people that I'm sure have not even looked at the website because they include things in their essays about a completely different program, right? So that very basic level of research is key to avoid. And then the other thing, and I don't want to take everything, but letters of recommendation are also vital for our review. And in round one is where I more commonly see people have weak letters of recommendation if they have not taken the time to meet with their recommender or really inform them on what the MBA process looks like, what they're hoping to get out of this degree. That kind of thing is important. And we see recommenders who maybe were told late or weren't given enough lead time to write their strongest letter as well. So make sure that you're keeping those people in mind too when you're applying.
Great
can-
tips. Yep, jump in, Paul.
One thing there, I'd say, even on the recommenders, another thing to consider when you're having those conversations is also, what does the rest of my application look like? Like, what piece of the application are you filling in for me? What hole in my, not hole in my story, but what missing piece in my story is the reason that I've reached out to you? Being explicit with that is only going to be helpful for them, right? If you really want them to be talking about a particular project that you worked on because it showcased collaboration or resilience, and you didn't really get to talk about that in other parts of your application, be clear about what it is that they are helping you do in your application, right? Because this is your picture that you're painting. They're just one piece of it, but they need to know what their role is in this.
And if I can just piggyback off of Paul there, just arm them with as much information as possible. Give them your essays, give them your resume. Print out information from the school so they know about the exact programs that you're applying to. If you have previous performance reviews that they've already written about you, highlighting some of those great projects and skills that you have, give them. I know that the letter of recommendation often feels like one piece that you don't have control over, but there are so many ways that you really can equip them and give them that direction. You're not writing the letter for them, but you're providing the guidance of, again, to Paul's point, how they're filling in that piece of the puzzle.
I think to speak to another aspect, to take it away from recommendation letters really quickly, I think that one thing that is just really par for the course, if you haven't given yourself that time to think through and to really mindfully approach the application process, is personalization. Because I think that one thing that a lot of schools are looking for are people who genuinely want to be a part of the program that they're offering. There are a lot of different schools and they offer a lot of different things. But when you're applying, a really good thing is to make sure that you're applying to these schools for a specific reason, rather than just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And there's some really easy ways that you can do that. Like Megan said, going to webinars, as well as, speaking to alums, speaking to current students. But sometimes I'm sure that everyone here can say they've read a lot of applications, and you can see when somebody, is just rushing through the process, throwing out as many applications as they can. And sometimes it's just really, really simple things like making sure that you're a fit for the program. So for example, we have a minimum work experience of 2 years, and we have a maximum of about 14. And you'll get in applications of people who have 0 years work experience or 25 years work experience. And you just can't really, it feels very bad because they clearly want to be a part of the program, but they haven't done the groundwork to look and say, okay, I actually fit in what you're looking for. Or alternately, they haven't reached out and said, hey, I know that I'm outside of this, but I have these really good reasons why I think I could be a great part of your program, to talk to the program. So I think if you have any questions at all, reaching out to the admissions team and just saying, hey, what can we do about this? I'm here, I really want to be a part of your program, but making sure that you're, again, applying to the program that's the best fit for you and showing why it's a good fit for you, rather than just hoping for the best as quickly as possible.
Great advice all around. And I do think these panelists are a great example of our friends that work in admissions that read lots and lots of applications and know their programs in and out, and are very savvy about understanding when they look at an application, what is authentic interest and what is, well, I did a 5-minute search on your website and I'm just going to like drop some things in there that don't authentically fit with this picture you're painting of your journey to an MBA program. So I think also that kind of school research piece, kind of going back to, what feels rushed or why you might want to wait, is if you haven't fully discovered whether or not that program is going to be a fit for what you're looking for, rather than just like, oh, I'm applying to this program because of its location or because of its ranking or something kind of surface level like that. So great advice. Thank you all. So once candidates submit their application, as we mentioned earlier, there's this timeline, right? There's this big piece of time where they're going to be sitting around waiting, hoping for good news. Any advice on what candidates can do once they hit submit on the application? What should they be doing with that time while they're waiting for a decision?
I would say take a break, pat yourself on the back. Like the application, hidden submit is a huge deal, a very big piece of the process. And I think let us get to work, right? A few of my colleagues have shared, a couple weeks out when you'll get an interview invitation. Obviously, in that time, you can maybe start to prepare for the interview. Hopefully, having done your application, there's pieces of that that have already got you prepared. For us, our interviews are on a rolling basis. So, again, I think being prepared to know what that program is, what your highlights are early is important. Like that should be a part of the application process. And when you hit submit, you should be able to take a deep breath and rest for a bit is my advice typically.
I think that's great advice. I also tell candidates to do that after they take the GMAT. It's like once you take a GMAT, you should just like pat yourself in the back. Take a PTO, like, and take a break for sure. Let's do Jen and then Megan.
I know the question is what you should do. I just want to caution of maybe what you shouldn't do. And that is refrain from sending excessive amounts of emails or calls, asking about things about, the deadline. If that's clear on the website of when we're going to release decisions, sending those types of emails over and over again. And if you are going to email us, make sure it's with a significant update. So if you've retaken the GMAT or you just got a promotion at your job, those things we definitely do want to hear about. But just emailing for the sake of emailing, I think there's a very fine line in terms of student engagement and trying to show that, they're really excited about this opportunity. We know you're excited. That's why you've hit submit. So if you don't really have anything, super meaningful and relevant to share with us, yes, please stay involved, attend our events, meet with, current students, things like that. But just be very mindful about the information and the updates that you're trying to send.
I was going to say exactly that. But I do also have another what not to do. And it's one of my pet peeves since I work so hard on the admissions process. I know that it's a complicated process, but I would hope that most of the research and preparation is happening before the deadline and that you're familiar with the school's requirements, that you are certain that your application is complete by the deadline. And so I loathe getting an email after the deadline, checking on, is this okay? And my recommender is going to take 2 weeks, and like those kind of follow up after the deadline, after you've hit submit. All of those questions are fine. A lot of them can be found on the website. Like, Jen was mentioning, make sure you're checking the website. But getting that preparation for the actual application out of the way before you hit submit, so that once you've done that, you can, like Paul said, take a break, relax, know that you've done everything you can to submit your strongest application.
Great advice. I almost asked what you should or shouldn't do, and then I just knew I didn't even have to say it. You all would take that to be able to answer both aspects of it, right? Because admissions offices are busy now reading your applications. So make sure that you're anytime you're reaching out to them, just know that like they're very busy. They're heads down usually reading, interviewing candidates, and yes, so significant updates only would certainly be appreciated. Absolutely. I think also, we mentioned some things earlier, like you could still attend webinars, go to events, talk to alums, like absolutely you should continue to do those things because, my advice to candidates is best case scenario, you get admitted and then you're gonna have to decide between programs. So like your research does not end when you submit the application. It changes once you've submitted the application. It will change again if you're offered a seat in the class. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. So definitely don't stop that research process either. Wonderful. Anything else about, for candidates to submit in round one? A lot of you mentioned that notifications would take place before the end of the calendar year. Candidates, then have 6+ months potentially to be probably not just twiddling their thumbs, but doing something. Any other recommendations for things, kind of farther into the future that early candidates could think about doing before they step foot on campus? I know we're really thinking into the future now, but Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that one thing that we always really recommend is a lot of the people who are starting their MBAs or their business school degrees, they might have taken a pretty significant amount of time since they've last been a student. And it is very different to the working world. And so kind of taking time to remember how to be a student. A lot of programs might offer sort of introductory sessions to remind you about that. So for example, we have onboarding from about April. And so just really letting yourself take full advantage of the time that you have to remember that you're going to be writing essays, sitting in lectures, you're going to be doing presentations, seminars, and that's something that they're muscles that you use and kind of starting to flex them a little bit again. And a lot of what our careers team would absolutely shout at me if I didn't say is to start thinking about what you're doing afterwards. So for example, if you're making a big pivot, maybe think about doing a pre-MBA internship. If there are some skills that you haven't used so much, maybe you're in an area where you're not using your quant skills as much. Maybe again, start to flex those muscles, think about what you can do. If you want to start using them in your post-MBA career, start looking at sort of mini modules that you can do ahead of time to make sure that you're coming in as prepared as possible. But then also to what Paul said, earlier, take some time, take a breather, be with your loved ones. It's going to be a wild year or 2 years. So really making sure that you're taking time to be as prepared and in a good place to start that as possible.
I always joke to our students that they should sleep as much as they can before they start the MBA, like catch up on sleep before you start the program.
Yeah.
Jen, yeah.
Our
Yeah,
students
no, sorry, Elizabeth.
our students always say that they have to prioritize more and sleep less. So I think that you're right on the money.
Jen, what advice do you have?
Yeah, so one of the things that I always advise students as they first start this process. So today, as you're listening to this webinar, hopefully you're taking some notes, thinking, it's a very introspective process. And as you are meeting with different schools through the application process and getting prepared to write your essays, you're already forming this idea of what you want out of those next 2 years in the program if you're doing a full-time program, for instance. But once you have that acceptance and you know for sure the program that you're going into, I think that's a really great time to fine tune what those maybe top 2 or 3 goals are. One of the biggest things you'll hear from current students is this idea of it's like drinking from a fire hose and this idea of FOMO and that you're going to have all of these different options thrown at you. And that can be very, very hard in the first couple of weeks, first semester as you get back to school. As others have mentioned, you may have been out of the classroom for a long time, so there's so much going all at once. So as much as you can prepare in advance to really narrow down that focus and, through the conversations you're having with current students, if you're talking with career counselors, using the website or the different resources to figure out what are some of those programs or opportunities in particular that are the top of your list that you're going to want to prioritize during those 2 years. That's going to be a huge resource as you really get into it. And you can always refer back to that when you're feeling pulled in a different direction once you get there. And I always use the example of, the fall hits and consulting seasons, in full swing, and all of your peers are like, I'm going to go be a consultant. And you're like, well, I never wanted to be a consultant, but everyone else is doing it. You have that notebook there and you say, nope, that's not my priority. My priority is this and this. And it really can help ground you because that's a tough part of an MBA program or any graduate program. As tough as the academics are, it's really prioritizing and making good use of your time and staying true to yourself. So as much introspection as you can continue doing to prepare, that's the one thing that I would really highlight.
I think that this theme is like that introspection piece is a muscle you're going to keep flexing at different pieces, different points in this process. So you're going to need to do it kind of as you're thinking about why an MBA and then what program is right for you. And then even when you're in the MBA, you're going to keep doing that. And guess what? You're going to do it again when you're looking for a job and throughout the rest of your professional career. So a great muscle to keep practicing for sure. Wonderful. So we do have some time to take some audience questions. And there's a question that popped up that I was going to ask anyway, so thank you to there were already 2 people that were asking this, and it's around the timeline for taking the exam and submitting an application. So in essence, the question is, after you submit an application, can I submit another test score afterwards? And the first thing I'll say is a lot of these questions, the answer you're going to get is going to be school dependent. So it's going to vary school to school. And even within that, you might get some variability in the answer. And the first thing I'll say is there are schools, I don't know that any of you go this way, but there are schools that say, once you submit the application, it is closed. There is nothing else you can submit. You better be sure that it's done. So you are going to want to ask individual schools if you have future test plans, if you already have them, when should you apply? So if you already know, hey, I'm sitting for the exam on October 1st, is that even going to be possible with a round 1 application deadline? You're probably going to have to ask some schools. If it's a retest, or I should say, if it's your first time taking the test, it's unlikely that schools are going to say that's fine, because again, your application is going to be incomplete without that. If it's a retest, you might get a different answer. But happy if anybody here has any thoughts. If someone knows they're going to be retaking the exam, should they wait? Should they submit and hope that schools are going to consider it? I know this is kind of open for interpretation and opinion.
Well, we are one of those schools. I wouldn't say that our application is closed after the deadline per se, but we do. Another thing is we only accept 1 test score per test, right? So you wouldn't be able to submit like your 3 most recent GRE scores. You could submit 1 GRE and 1 GMAT, but that 1 test score is the score that we're going to be looking at. And of course, we will want that prior to the deadline, right? So if you are taking a test after the deadline, we typically will not consider it. Now, if you submit a new test score to us like the day after, like there's the possibility of like that just is the test that the reader sees. But we start reading applications all but immediately after the deadline. So If your application gets read before we see a new test, then that is what we are reviewing.
We're
Paul.
actually kind of the opposite, Paul. We have a 2-week grace period after the applications are submitted, in which, if the recommendation is running a bit late, or if they have a test booked, but we just happen to have an inconvenient deadline, I suppose, then you do have those kind of 2 weeks in order to submit. And we won't actually, if the overall application is incomplete without a GMAT or GRE, and you're able to submit it within those 2 weeks, then that works. But there is the chance that we might have read the application before you send your updated one. So while we could look back at the application, it might not change it substantially enough. So try to submit it in full ahead of time, but we do have that time frame in case you don't have everything all together right then.
And I would just say another nuance to this is there's a difference between having the unofficial scores and the official test scores. So most universities you can apply using your unofficial test scores. So there are students that test even the day the application is due, but they have that, and then you can send a screenshot of the unofficial test scores. That's fine for the application process. You're more than welcome to send the official scores later if that is kind of where you're thinking about this question.
Megan, did you want to add something? I saw you took yourself off mute.
No, I was just going to say the theme is that every school is different, I think, because I'm similar to Elizabeth in some ways and similar to Paul. So just ask the school, I think, is the biggest piece of advice, if you're really in that in-between section, and see what their advice would be.
Great advice, generally speaking. And I'm going to make a plug that all of these schools are member schools. They'll be at our forums. You can come ask these questions. These are great questions. And they're kind of personal, right? So like we had I feel like there's a lot of asterisks on our answers of like, are you taking the same day? Are you talking official or unofficial? Like we have follow-up questions if that's your question. So this conversation in person or kind of in a one-on-one setting is a great way to go about doing that. And we know like testing is a big source of anxiety. And so we want to make sure that you have the answers as you're going to the test. So you're not thinking like, oh my gosh, I have this added layer of stress of not knowing, what might be having with your application, certainly. Great. So thank you for that question. There's a question here, not really related to round one, but I thought it was an interesting question from Anonymous. Is there anything that you think most prospective students overlook when assessing whether your MBA program is the right fit? So any hidden things you think candidates should be considering?
I mean, I think that it's weird because it feels like the one thing that folks would be looking at. But I think what I hear more often than maybe it surprises me more than it maybe surprises students is community and like not fully understanding like that each of our schools have a different vibe, that how you show up in that space is going to be very important also for how we're reviewing applications, right? That is kind of why none of our schools have switched to AI making these decisions for us, right? It is about forming a class in a community on campus and knowing who and what in an application really makes for someone that is going to join our community, be involved while they're on campus, but then be active alumni and give back in the ways that our alumni currently give back, right? Like each of our alumni engage with our current students and prospective students a little differently. And again, I think that's because this is the community they came into when they were in the program. That is the nurturing that happened after they graduated. I think maybe the reason that it's hard for some folks is it's kind of hard to pin down, right? Like you do have to ask the right questions from alums or current students, or just even be probing into what community looks like. So yeah, maybe not something that folks like just actively overlook, but it is one that surprises me when I don't see folks have a good understanding.
Well, I think it's probably one of the most effortful things to investigate about a school because you have to talk to students and alumni and visiting sometimes is the best way to do that. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago, and one of the recommendations from a panelist was they recommended if you do visit campus to go to a couple different places on campus. So they were like, stand outside of a classroom, see how candidates interact with each other when they're leaving an academic environment, sit in where students are having lunch, how do they interact with each other, go to a gathering place on campus. So it was kind of like, how do you assess that vibe? And the other advice we typically give to launchers is don't just talk to one person and make a decision based on that one person. Because like there's always going to be one person that's like the outlier, right? Like if you have a bad conversation, you're like, oh, I didn't like that person, therefore I don't like the school. No, you need much more data to gather. So I think you're right, Paul. It's super important, but it's laborious, right? You can't just Google, and you could, but I guarantee you that's not going to be the right answer. Like, what is the community like at X school? Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
I think to what you were saying about speaking to multiple people, I think that one of the most important things is that your MBA is very much you get out what you put in. And that everybody's experience is going to look completely different. So if you say, I want to go into this and I want to have the exact experience that XYZ alumni had, then you might be preparing yourself for disappointment. But if you go into your MBA and you say, here's what I want to get out of it, I think we were talking earlier about prioritization and really thinking about what you want to get out of your MBA, that is going to be really, really key. And so no program is going to be the perfect program, but making sure that you are in one that really suits you and gets you to where you want to go. That's the most important thing, not searching kind of fruitlessly for one that has every single elective and possibility and society that you want to be a part of, but making sure that you're in one that can support you for where you want to go and that can support you in putting in the effort and the care and the time and being a part of a community, as Paul was saying, that you're excited to be a part of.
Wonderful advice. Oh yeah, Megan.
Just to bring those things together, if I could, if you're looking for a way to kind of keep things in line, I typically suggest people look at the school from a career perspective, a curriculum perspective, and a community perspective, and then coming up with your negotiables and your non-negotiables for each of those categories, right? Like, what am I looking for within these? Download the career report, talk to alums, as we've mentioned. And I think, yes, absolutely everything that my colleagues have said, 100% retweet. But in addition to that, curriculum is also overlooked in a lot of ways. So diving a little bit into, well, what is the structure? We have our front-loaded core classes in the first semester, and then the entire rest of the program is flexible. You can choose your electives based on your interests and your goals. That's not necessarily true for every single program, right? So are you wanting a tech focus, a consulting focus, a finance focus? What's the school strongest in? And so looking beyond just, I think the inclination is rankings and then website, but what, again, self-reflective, what am I looking for from each of these criteria? And does the school fit most of those? Because again, it won't fit all. But yeah, those are kind of the 3 buckets that I suggest.
Wonderful. As we wrap, I want to give each of the opportunity, if you have a quick piece of advice, final piece of advice for our candidates, I'll give you all the opportunity. No, you don't have to, but if there's any last piece of advice you want to share, I want to give you all the opportunity to do that.
I think for me, it would be talk to people, talk to people, talk to people, look at people in your network, ask them about their network, talk to the admissions team, talk to the school, talk to alum, talk to students, just talk to people. There's going to be so much that you gain that you would have no idea about for your essays, for your interview, if you didn't reach out to people. And one of the big things is that people are going to be so generally happy to talk to you. Lots of people love being part of a community and they love having people join their community. So talk to people as much as you can.
Great advice. Selfishly, I'm going to say, come to webinars. So that's what you all did today. Come to webinars, come to forums. Yeah, Jen.
I think this idea of staying true to yourself. So, going back to my earlier point about the self-reflection, yes, graduate school is a place where you are going to undergo change. It is going to be very transformational. But I think, Megan, it was you who talked about like the negotiables and the non-negotiables. So as you're making these decisions, make sure that you're staying true to yourself and you're doing what's best for you, not because of this is, what a family member or a mentor has told you is going to be the best fit for you. It really, at the end of the day, has to be what is going to be best for you personally. Listen to that gut instinct.
I'd say on the same note, also be willing to share that with us um, as vulnerably as you feel comfortable, right? I get the question a lot, like folks say that I should be open and vulnerable in the application, but like what's right? Is there ever too far? And I think for us in particular, like our essay question is what matters most to you. And if what matters most to you leads to you being very open with us, telling us how that has happened, right? Because it is what matters most to you and why, right? We are looking to understand you, right? All of us are looking to understand you. Obviously, there are certain things you do want to have a little bit of discernment. Like if it's not relevant and you're sharing things with us that are very personal to you that don't add value, like yes, be cautious there. But I think, generally speaking, be as open as you feel comfortable with us because the thing that typically has one person stand out from the next person is them, not their numbers, not their work experience per se, unless that is added to what makes you you. It is like who you are as a person, what your lived experience has brought to bear for how you engage with the world around you, right? And if we don't get to hear about that because you think we want to hear a certain thing, then you really are shooting yourself in the foot.
I'll be really quick, Ashley. My last piece of advice is also, we've talked a lot about the communities at the school and the resources that are available to you through us, through Forté, et cetera. But you also have a community already with your family, your friends, the people close to you. And in this process, that's more important than ever because it is a stressful, fast-paced environment. So prepare the people around you for this big change that you're embarking on and make sure that you have that support outside of school as well, because you're not the only one being affected by classes and recruiting and things like that. The people who care about you are as well. So just make sure that you're staying in touch with those close to you throughout the process.
Thank you all for the great advice. Thank you all so much for being here generally and having this amazing conversation today. Hopefully, to our attendees, you all got some actionable advice to take forward with you, whether you apply in round one or in a later round. I know all of my colleagues here today are excited to see your applications in the future and to hear your stories. I do want to close us out today, thanking our amazing panelists for being here today. We super appreciate your support. I know we did not get to all the questions in the Q&A, so thank you for those that submitted questions. I tried to kind of keep us on topic, but if you submitted a question and we didn't get to it, feel free to send us an email. We're always happy to help, you learn more. But a big thank you to our amazing panel. Jen, Elizabeth, Paul, and Megan. My absolute pleasure to moderate this conversation today. Thank you all attendees for being here. We certainly hope to see you at a future event or future webinar. Goodness gracious. But